Hello and welcome to Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is Patrick Knisley.
My name is Matthew Stoner.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, we got ourselves two very special guests joining us on tonight's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Epstein and my boss, Adam Deats, join us on the show. How we doing, Adam and Joe?
Oh, we're doing well.
Thanks for having me.
I feel you're really awkward about that boss declaration. I know. I'm really nervous.
Yeah. No, right. Yeah. So if he doesn't sound 100% professional, then
Call him my boss. His father is Adam Deats.
yeah, that's right.
Adam and Joe, thanks for coming on. Y'all are here to talk to us about strategy guides and sort of that industry surrounding that, especially since you both worked in that, and we'll get into that. We'll also maybe talk a little bit about the fan perspective of using them, but we're going to talk a lot about the inside of what it was like working in that field. And we've got a lot of news to talk about. There's been a lot of, I think, rumors and E3 leak type rumors that we're hearing in video game world right now. The Katy Perry Pokemon song came out.
Let's go.
Big news.
That's the most controversial topic we have on the docket.
And we do have a very controversial topic that we will possibly talk about. But that's not Katy Perry. We've got a lot of great stuff we'll cover. But before we get into any of that kind of stuff, how is everybody doing? How's this week been?
Week's been great for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Castlevania Season 4 came out, so I've been pretty stoked about the response.
That's right. Congratulations, Adam.
Congratulations, David.
Yeah. No,
both of y'all's names are on there, right?
Yeah, we share a credit slide. Yeah. That was been a really cool week. Seeing all the fan reaction and everything to that show is pretty awesome. Yeah,
this is as good as it gets. Really, the energy's been so high.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched it yet, don't worry about it. You can skip it. It's cool. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't skip it at all. You have to watch it like right now within the first 4 weeks, please.
Does that matter, or can we not talk about that?
Pause this. Watch it right now.
Yeah.
Why are you listening to this? Go watch Castlevania Season 4.
Actually, yes. How soon you watch it does matter. I'll say that much.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, we're probably not supposed to talk more about that, so we won't, but
It's all good.
I do want to say congratulations to y'all. I mean, Adam's an ancient friend of mine, and it's just been really exciting seeing him get to do this. And I mean, I won't be blowing smoke up your asses to say this is unequivocally the best video game adaptation ever.
Hell yeah.
I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. That's really
surprisingly, the bar's been so low. So
No, I agree. It's like anytime like a good video game anything comes out, I get so excited because it's such an untapped well of like media. It's like really is the next superhero movie genre, you know?
I don't want to ruin the news, but there is a Katy Perry Pokemon song that might be the best video game adaptation ever in our news.
Fair enough, really.
What about y'all? How was y'all's weeks?
I've just been real busy with the transition that I was talking about last week of my job stuff.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm doing okay. Matt, Joe, what about you?
I've been pretty good over here. I went to one of the first few bars this weekend. David, you and I went out for a couple drinks.
That's right. Yeah.
Got a drink on. We were
got
also
COVID
talking,
immediately.
Got it. And here you are. If you're listening
They put
right
it in
now.
the beer now.
Thankfully.
It's the beer salt. Yeah.
God.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really good. You should try COVID. It's great.
They COVID the rim.
Yeah. I also went out
Just
to there's a dance club that just opened up called Outer Haven Disco Club, which is a deep cut on a Kojima game called Snatcher. It's a fake club in that game. And I went out there this weekend, and it's a brand new. It's a local bar owner, local artist who bought it from a previously bar called Dozen Street on 12th. Would highly recommend.
In Austin?
Yeah, it's in Austin. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah. It was a cool place. They play disco music. What's not to love?
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great.
My week has been pretty dope. Also, we're right about combat designer and writer for Enway, so we're right about to release Ryu and Chun-Li for Battle for the Grid.
That's right. Yeah. I forgot. That's super hype. Everybody's really excited for that.
Yeah,
the first Power Rangers fighting game.
Right.
Yeah, and it's kind of like if you want to play a Marvel vs. Capcom style chaotic tag fighter, it's the best one out right now. And I still can't believe I got to work on the Street Fighter character crossover. So I'm really excited. That's going to come out, I think, next Tuesday on the 25th. So
super.
That's
awesome.
been my week, is getting ready for that. That's really exciting.
Nice. Yeah. I got that downloaded on Game Pass. I'll have to pick up the DLC.
I remember some comments on both of those trailers, the Ryu for Battle for the Grid and Chun-Li, like, who's the mascot for Street Fighter? And everyone's like, it's Ryu. But everyone, the comments are just like, no one understands how big Chun-Li really is, how big her fan base is. It's huge.
Oh, in Japan, for sure, she's the most popular Capcom character, I think.
Chun-Li is the most popular fighting game character of all time.
Oh.
Yeah. So, that's super exciting. I'm really stoked to see everybody react to that. I think we did a really good job. And
great stuff.
Yeah. We're all winding down from big projects.
Big week for everyone on the pod tonight. Yeah.
Well, moving on, our last episode was on Nintendo's marketing, and we had some good comments on that. Doug DeFreitas mentioned "Play It Loud," which is one of the many slogans we didn't really get a chance to talk about. We kind of had to gloss over the slogans. We talked so much about other things.
We'll do a whole 55 minutes on slogans on a future episode. Don't worry.
Yeah. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing names here. Henry Taste It said this is their favorite episode yet. If anybody knows how to pronounce their name, I apologize. And then, yes, thank you, Henry. And then on the Discord and some other places, I kind of talked about some personal news, and we got a lot of people saying congrats and stuff to me. I appreciate that. Summer, DCD, Lee, Ant Keeps Gaming on some big life changes for me coming up. And we'd love to hear from our listeners. So if you're listening to this episode and you have any thoughts or feelings, please share them. Also, please share the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, that kind of stuff. We loved all that. So
we're getting hella close to that 250 mark. So shoot us a sub.
Yes,
because we got some special stuff coming out if we hit our mark.
And then we'll talk news and rumors in the video game and especially Nintendo world now. The most recent Switch version update just happened on May 11th, version 12.0.2. I don't think there's anything huge on this one. General stability. I think under the hood, there might be more Bluetooth stuff going on. Something's going on.
Say what you will about the Switch. That is one stable fucker. All right, they have really stabilized the hell out of the system, and I really appreciate Nintendo for that.
And then, kind of like I talked about at the top of the show, we've got a bunch of rumors and alleged leaks to kind of go over here. The biggest one that's been making the rounds is this has been rumored for a while, but a new Donkey Kong game, and in particular which development team that's working on it's one of the I guess it's one of the EPD groups in Nintendo Japan. The rumor is that it's the Super Mario Odyssey team that's working on this game. There's been some conflicting reports about whether it's 2D or 3D, but a number of different sources have been pointed to for this one. Y'all excited if there is a new Donkey Kong game? Would you want it to be 2D or 3D or any new
Depending on
Donkey Kong?
the day of the week you ask me, I might say I think Odyssey's the best video game ever made. So I will take whatever that team would like to make.
Yeah.
I'm a big Odyssey fan as well. And
too.
so I agree that this is exciting news if whatever they're working on. But yeah.
For sure. I mean, I love everything that Rare and Retro have done with the Donkey Kong Country franchise. And I love those. I think like Tropical Freeze is one of the best 2D games ever made, at least 2D platformers ever made. And so I'm personally excited to hear that I think the majority of sources are saying that this is probably a 2D game. So that's exciting to me because I think Donkey Kong works well in 2D. I'm interested as to how, the Odyssey team will do that. I mean, there are great like 2D sections in Odyssey, like whenever he would kind of like stick to the wall or whatever, kind of Link Between Worlds style, I suppose. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, and obviously this is still a rumor. It has been corroborated by a lot of people, but I'm just glad to see Donkey Kong getting his chance to shine. And very interested to see what they do outside of the kind of country brand of games, if that's to be believed as well.
Yeah. And to that point, somebody that we talk about when these leaks and stuff come up sometimes is an individual by the name of Zippo. And they have been one of the people saying that there's a 2D Donkey Kong game coming. And I think what you said is they say that this is not a country game, right?
Right.
And Zippo also is saying that this 2D Metroid game is coming that we've been hearing rumors about as well for over a year at this point.
Something different than Prime 4?
Yeah, there's been rumors that a 2D Metroid game has been sitting finished at Nintendo for a period of time.
I could talk about that kind of stuff later, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into it. Yeah. But I mean, Mercury Steam they did Samus Returns on the 3DS, which I think they did a really great job with.
That was a good game.
Yeah. And I think that there have been rumors that this is a Super Metroid remake, which I kind of would hope it would maybe be an original game since Super Metroid is already it's good.
Perfect. Yeah, you don't need to change that game.
Yeah, it holds up incredibly well. But either way, I definitely think that this game has been finished for a long time. Like there's no way Nintendo didn't put them on a Switch Metroid game after Samus Returns was received so well. And I think some news just came out that Mercury Steam is now working on like a third-person shooter new IP game, right? So
the rumor for the 2D Metroid is that it's Mercury Steam.
Yeah, that Mercury Steam has developed this one as well. So
they did a Batman Arkham game for PS Vita that was a kind of a Metroidvania detective game, and they actually did a Castlevania game.
Yeah,
Adam probably remembers that.
They did. Yeah, that's why
I wrote an unpublished guide for that.
Yeah.
At least I got paid.
Yeah. But I mean, Mercury Steam is obviously no stranger to Metroidvanias, right? And so I'm very excited to play this game for sure.
And continuing with Zippo's rumors of their recent post, we've also been hearing Fire Emblem rumors that some Fire Emblem game might be coming soon. Zippo seemed to suggest that is true, though they don't have details. And they also mentioned Super Mario Party 2 is a likely thing we might see soon, which also there's been some stuff pointing to that. And lastly, they also have said that Breath of the Wild 2 is not coming this year, but probably early next year, which is, I've also seen other sort of alleged E3 leaks that say the same thing. I don't know how believable any of this is, but it's fun to talk about.
That makes sense. That game's so big, it's going to take a long time to develop it, I think.
If any of the big Nintendo projects were affected by COVID too, I think it would have been Breath of the Wild, just because of the scope of that thing. Or the assumed scope of that thing. Maybe it's a level-based side scroller for all we know. But yeah, I mean, do you guys? I mean, we're kind of gonna start to see, I think, every week now, big juicy Nintendo E3 rumors popping down.
Of course,
yeah. These all seem like pretty believable, though. To me.
I saw another leak. Alleged, right? Like E3 leak that lined up with a lot of this, and it could have just well been stolen from it, and you know what I mean, and using the same info. But I'm kind of ready for E3 because I don't want to wade through too much of this before it, but we're gonna be.
Yeah, we'll have 3 weeks of waiting before. Okay, it's like 3 weeks away, right?
Yeah, I mean it's more like a month, right? June 12th, 11th,
so.
something like that. So
either way, that's pretty exciting. I'm very excited for E3 to pop back up.
And then I haven't had a chance to look into this in detail, but maybe David, you could talk a little bit about this. I know that, the Sega Sammy investor, like end of fiscal year presentation just happened. And in particular, as I understand it, in that presentation, there was some talk about some of their old franchises that we haven't seen in a while, which suggests that they might be working on some, whether it's, reboots or remakes or or remasters of some of their old games.
Like everybody else in this industry right now, basically.
Well, there has been some alluding to them making a new Virtua Fighter game,
right?
Which obviously I'm excited about. So some of that might make sense.
A new one, or because they're about to re-release Virtua Fighter 5 that we wrote a guide for 13 years ago.
To stay on topic, but like there's rumors that that's going to be piggybacked into
a new one.
But I don't know. I have no idea.
Right.
I think it makes sense. I think a lot of people have been doing that recently, just kind of like digging into their back catalog, throwing it out, seeing if it's sticking or if it's being picked back up, and then kind of using that momentum to release new versions of the game. So I'm definitely into it. I know there were a couple franchises that were name dropped, like Nights into Dreams, which is funny because Balan Wonderworld just came out and was a huge flop. But
I know it's sad.
Yeah, but it's a bummer. Yeah. But Nights into Dreams was dropped. I think Crazy Taxi, a lot of the older like Dreamcast era of Sega games were kind of talked about as potential avenues they're trying to go down into, but definitely.
I feel like I saw a Kotaku headline that basically phrased this as Sega remembers that they have beloved video games.
Right. Yeah. They're more than just like Sonic and Atlas, basically. Yeah. Both of which I'm here for. I'll take anything from Sonic Team and Atlas, but
yeah, it's just the nature of putting stuff out there is you can strike it hot with something new, but investors are so risk averse that if it's like there's something that people like us who grew up with games and then now are a little older and there's like the cycles come back around again for us to be like, oh, remember that thing I loved when I was a kid or a teenager or what have you.
Yeah.
It makes it more likely that it doesn't flop. Although of course, it's still kind of rolling some dice.
Yeah. I think a lot of the like Sega, like new IP games, like original IP that came out in kind of like the earlier 2000s into like early 2010s and stuff like that didn't do quite as well as they probably would have hoped. Also, it's kind of like they're just finding that the old tried and true stuff is really what's bringing in the bacon. So we'll see. I mean, they just need to put out a Dreamcast Mini at this point. I would buy the shit. Yeah, I want it. It's just a VMU. That's all the Dreamcast Mini is.
I mean, I think Joe wants that just so he can play Marvel 2 forever in its perfect format.
Yeah, I'm sure that has zero licensing issues and they can bring that out. Totally
absolutely
fine.
not these days. Yeah.
Well, moving on.
Best system ever.
Agreed.
The Pokemon 25th anniversary is this year, and as they declared earlier in the year, they are releasing these pop songs, including the most recent Katy Perry Electric song. And I think if I listened to this song without watching the video, I would just think it's a regular Katy Perry song.
She's already got songs about combustibles in the sky. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it just sounds like it's on brand.
Yeah, it's on brand. It's a decent song. That's all I'll say, I guess.
It's no Hootie and the Blowfish, though. We can all agree on that, right?
No, was it Post Malone that did that?
Post Malone covering Hootie and the Blowfish. Yeah.
Was that? I think I through headline osmosis saw news about a Post Malone Pokemon crossover. Was that a real thing, or was I hallucinating?
No, that's real.
Both.
But it's hard not to hallucinate when you watch it. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like basically, it's like a CG Post Malone floating around on like an Omega version of a Smash Brothers stage with just like random Pokemon floating in and out of the frame. It's pretty odd.
Doing a cover of Hootie and Blowfish.
Yeah, it's a fever dream. Yeah.
Who conceived of this?
The Pokemon Company?
Post Malone, though?
Yeah.
All right.
He's super hot right now. He's super hot right now.
And I guess we can expect more of these tracks to keep releasing, but I think those are the big ones that they kind of hinted at. So
listen, Nintendo, I know you're listening. I just want a ska cover. Use a Mighty Boss Tones.
Voodoo Glow Skulls.
I was just gonna
Pokemon.
Say, bring back the Mighty Boss Tones. I think.
Come on, Nintendo, don't be cowards. Bring back ska.
It's your responsibility, Nintendo.
And while we're talking, or a couple items back, talking about old games coming back out and going for that nostalgia factor of people around our age, The Zombies Ate My Neighbors game, as well as Ghoul Patrol, are going to be sold in one pack on the Switch. They just announced for $15 coming out June 29th. And I know a lot of people are excited about that because those, yeah. So now you'll have a chance to play those in portable fashion on your Switch.
Yeah, just more of the things that would be virtual console games, but there is no virtual console, so they just decide to make money off it themselves. Yeah.
And then Koei Tecmo is the company that does the Warriors games, the Musu, the Samurai Warriors games. Muso, and there was an interview that they did on The Gamer with Koei Tecmo's president, who talked about various things, but of relevance to this podcast in particular is he said that he would be interested in doing a Mario Warriors game, which actually I might be into. Like, I could see just hordes of Goombas coming and you just stomp them literally.
Well, I think it'd probably be like super flashy, right? Like that's why I would want to see something like that, is like round cartoon characters just pulling off like wacky anime finishers for 20 hours.
You know, when they did the second Hyrule Warriors game, we're all like, what franchises, because obviously Nintendo's working with them on this, what franchises could they do? Nobody that I can recall pitched Mario. We all were like thinking of other franchises, but I actually think it could work. I don't know.
I don't think it's as far-fetched as it might initially feel, because like one of the reasons I'd cite Odyssey is I think that's a masterfully designed game. One of the reasons is that it can be all things to all people. You can play through that whole game like it's Mario and just hit the jump button and do normal jumps and you can do everything. Or you can play like it's Bayonetta Mario. Like there are execution things you can do in that game. And when I wrote the official guide for that. And I also wrote the official manual for that game.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And when I first got hands on it, which one of the weird nerd joys of my life was having access to Mario Odyssey like a half a year before everyone.
Nice.
I just spent 2 days moving him around and and like doing different, like, can I cancel this? Can I cancel that? And he can do insane fighting game-esque tricks with the hat tosses and the different jumps and whatnot. So it can be very execution heavy, or it can feel like old Mario. You can pick along that spectrum what you want to play as. Plus, obviously, Smash can be kind of derpy, or it can be deeply technical. I mean, if that rumor's true, I could totally see being able to make combat mechanics out of the Mario characters.
Yeah. Not quite of much relevance to this podcast, but they also said that they'd like to do a Star Wars one, which
hell yeah,
I also could see working.
That would be awesome. I mean, I think that game already exists, isn't it? Like Jedi Power Battles, isn't that basically what that game was?
Masters of Terras Kasi.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Now we're into the fighting game community stuff, right?
That was never part of the fighting game community. As a representative of the fighting game community, let me be clear.
Come
on. While we're talking about Mario, Nintendo put out a new trailer, a sort of detailed trailer for Mario Golf Super Rush, which is coming out in the end of June. And honestly, they did a good job with this trailer. It makes the game look pretty great. It definitely, compared to the last Mario sports game we got on the Switch, which is Mario Tennis Aces, there's a lot of criticism of various aspects of that game that they seem to be addressing in this trailer, which we can go over. There's also some news things shown off, and in particular, the new things that look really cool are the Battle Golf. There's going to be a sort of competitive. I mean, there already is a competitive multiplayer aspect of the speed golf that they've shown off, but now there's a separate sort of like, I guess, what do you compare it to, like the Mario Kart battle as sort of like?
Yeah, it kind of looked like battle arenas from Mario Kart, but it's like a bowl, or like kind of a one big domed area with all the holes in the middle. And it's kind of, you get to pick what hole you are firing to. And I thought that looked really unique and cool.
And they also showed off a little bit about the single player campaign, and that you can actually choose how to upgrade your character, which I think is one of the things that Aces was kind of missing. But they also showed off at least the initial character roster. If history is to be, suggest anything. Maybe they will add some DLC characters over time, but there's 16 characters starting, and perhaps the most interesting choices are Charging Chuck, which I don't know if Charging Chuck has been a playable character in anything. Can y'all
the football guy from Super Mario World?
Yeah, that throws the baseball.
Oh hell yeah!
But he's wearing a football helmet like while golfing.
I expect nothing less.
Yeah, I wanted him to have like a little visor resting on top of his helmet. I thought that would have been really nice.
Combo helmet.
Yeah.
The other unusual one is King Bob-omb, I guess. From Mario 64. So that's cool. They always pull a weird character or three in these, it seems like. So that's cool.
Yeah. I'm 1,000% on board and ready for this game. I'm like, especially in the past like couple years, for some reason, I've just gotten really into golf games, like Neo Turf Masters and a lot of those like older arcade golf games are just super fun to me. And this just looks like that. And there will be that. And like the actual traditional golf mechanics look really well thought out and have evolved after decades of like making golf games, but then also adding in this madcap shit where like speed golf, where you're like running forward and all characters have like a unique boost that they have in the speed mode where you can like knock people out of your way as you're like all racing to get to the balls at the same time. It just looks like chaos. So I'm super excited.
Total aside, but something you just said made me think of it. I think it was somebody in our Discord, maybe Summer, saying that like, I don't really like golf. Well, neither do I, but I like golf video games. You know what I mean?
Same.
It's weird. The sports.
I would never fucking play golf.
Yeah, I'm kind of against golf. Like, I think it's a waste of space and resources, and you know what I mean? Like
sprinklers. The same thing could be said. Like, I don't really like fighting myself, but I love fighting games.
Yeah.
Alley's chock full of people throwing fireballs at each other. It's like, I'm trying to go to the mall. Come on. Yeah. There's never been a bad Mario Golf. You guys talking about the trailer and the news is exciting to me because I was sold at new Mario Golf. So I haven't looked at anything. I don't need it.
Yeah. Well, it does look super cool. And this, I was already, like you said, I was already into it, but this only made me more interested, which is good.
I think a lot of people will notice this trailer. They did a good job showcasing it.
Yeah, I too am excited about this. I hope that all of the game modes are playable online.
Yes.
Like
I bet
battle mode, speed mode, traditional golf, all that.
I hope so. I think Aces did a good job of this. Like they even had the like handheld like motion mode. Like I think you could play that online even, if I'm not mistaken. But it felt like they
one at least.
Yeah. I mean, that game eventually kind of died. Like the online, it's like hard to find good matches in Aces right now. But for a while, it was like really well supported.
Yeah. So let's hope that they continue to update this game like that and add a bunch of characters and all that. Just quick reminder that Miitopia is releasing this Friday. If you're interested in that, this is the 3DS game that's kind of revamped a little bit, at least with the Mii Creation tool we know. And I don't know that there's a whole lot else new to it, but that is coming out this week.
Mii's.
Yes. Which also there are Mii's in Mario Golf. So actually, I think, we're not saying things like that anymore, are we, David? Okay, I'll shut up.
Mii's are fucking back, baby. Mii's are back. Mii's are back in a big way. I'm very excited.
And then the Nintendo financial end of the year, fiscal year report that happened last week that we talked about, they always takes them a little while to translate the Q&A into English. And sometimes there's interesting stuff in here. I skimmed through this one. There's some actually interesting comments by Furukawa, the president of Nintendo, and answering some questions. Some of the bigger ones that are going around and as turned into news items include him dropping the 20% number when referring to Switch purchases over the year that were second Switches in a household. So somebody did the math in one of the articles I read and said that's around 6 million Switches.
Yeah, damn.
So it's kind of, that seems like a big number, but at the same time, when you think about families and that kind of thing, I guess, the Switch is kind of like a phone almost. It's like, when you take it with you and that kind of stuff, you kind of want to have your own. So I thought that was an interesting fact. And
makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense too that they're in like year 5 right now and they're projecting like 25 million units. It's like, this is a big
year
chunk.
5?
Yeah. It's the
How did
5th year of the
that
Switch now. Time marches on, whether we're ready or not.
Sure does.
Yeah. It's a real shame sometimes.
Yeah. And then that production amount that you were talking about, I think one of the things that was also being shared around is talking just about the shortage that's happening now, the chip shortage that's happening, and it's going to likely impact, everything, right? Not all kinds of electronics, but including console sales, and that it might be hard to make enough to meet demand and that sort of thing, especially if there's a revision.
Thanks, Dogecoin.
Yeah. Right. That's what it is, right? It's crypto mining is the problem, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely a problem for like graphics cards and stuff. But
do you like when NVIDIA announced that they were nerfing the crypto mining capabilities of a new graphics card because everyone was scooping them up to put them in giant liquid cooled shacks in their yard or whatever?
Yeah. I think they actually just, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it was NVIDIA, but like somebody recently just put out a graphics card that actually doesn't have an output like for that purpose. It's like, it's like missing the part that actually does stuff, just in an attempt to get people to buy those instead of the ones that everybody else wants. So hopefully that works. I know Joe Biden is like trying to he said that he'd be taking a look at this product line or whatever, or the whatever you call it.
This is a whole separate conversation, but I know that like Tesla has stopped accepting Bitcoin, right? And they used to be a big, what's the word I'm looking for? Investor and supporter of it, because citing the environmental concerns that we are kind of somewhat talking about, but not exactly directly talking about. So I think that I do feel like maybe there's going to be a shift. And I know like Ethereum and some of the other cryptocurrencies are trying to find ways to lessen their environmental impact and not need graphics cards and things like that. So maybe there will be some shift in this long term.
And let's get real. Okay. Environment. Who cares about it? All right. We need to get our hands on PS5s and Switch Pros and all these fun devices. Okay. And that's the real issue.
In our super hot.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm joking. I really want to protect the planet.
It's all up to you, David.
Yeah, I guess this has fallen once again.
David, creator and sustainer of all things Castlevania and Legend of Zelda, it's up to you to solve the climate crisis.
Adam's on the show, man. Come on.
No, it's all David.
It was. Yeah.
Well, if climate crisis isn't controversial enough to talk about, our next news item is also very controversial, and
I'll also be solving this crisis. Yeah.
I think but the angle we're going to take here is to just talk about what happened with IGN. There were some employees there that and correct me if I'm wrong, because I honestly don't know a lot of details about this, but they posted some support or some ways to support some Palestinian organizations or that kind of thing. And I think it's maybe even officially an IGN type thing, but then the parent company of that company took that down and issued like an apology. And then now the IGN employees are upset, and there's some pushback. And so there's obviously some internal things going on. And I think when we were talking about this before we started recording, somebody said sometimes this can be a indicator of other internal things going on, maybe between the parent company as well. And this is just kind of a straw that broke the camel's back type situation. But
it was an article that was posted publicly on IGN's on the website, and several of the IGN specific country versions of the website also posted their own, and they were pretty much all taken down by the parent companies. And I'm actually forgetting the name. I know was Ziff Davis, right? Yeah, J2, and Ziff Davis. And so just today, like a little bit before we recorded, and this is kind of why I wanted to put this in the show notes. A lot of the staff kind of wrote an open letter basically like asking, publicly for the parent companies to like sit down with them and just to be like, hey, we just think it's really important that we maintain our own editorial kind of journalistic integrity and the ability to post what we want as an organization. And I think that in a lot of ways, people so often are like, especially when talking about IGN, like I'm actually a really big fan of IGN. Like people love to give IGN shit, but
it's like they're the big one, right?
Because they're the big one, yeah. But they've got a lot of really good writers and like a lot of people that actually, truly, obviously, really care about video games, and I think are very honest with their reviews and articles for the most part. And this just kind of goes to show, like, at least right now, that they don't seem like they're like easily bought out or like dissuaded, or their journalistic integrity is challenged very often if this is how they responded very publicly to their own parent company. So I just thought that was commendable, at least of them. As just somebody who's not good at, dealing with authority in general sometimes. Sorry, Adam. It's just like it makes me feel good to see some people like, standing up for themselves, especially in a public scale like this.
And, I think they reacted perfectly. I mean, the reality is the stuff always internally is more complicated than people know from the outside, because there's a bunch of outside factors that are funding the company, and people don't want to lose their jobs. But they took a brave stance. It didn't go quite the way they wanted to. That is unfortunately the case a lot of the time. You know? But it seems as though that somebody over there is acting as bravely as they can in those circumstances from an outside perspective, but who knows?
This is just like when Jeff Gertzman stood up for his Kane and Lynch 2 review on Games.
That's an exact 100% one-to-one.
Do you know what I thought about with this stuff? I mean, obviously, we're not going to solve Israel-Palestine on this podcast. Also, nobody's going to. But
right.
The thing I thought of in terms of where whatever parent interests clearly went against what the journalists wanted to say, was reminded of Michael Jordan refusing to comment on a Senate race between Jesse Helms and Harvey Gantt. Back in the 90s. Do y'all remember what Michael Jordan is quoted as saying?
No, I do not.
Republicans buy sneakers too. So you had the most obviously Jesse Helms is an abhorrent racist his whole life. Harvey Gantt was the black man running against him. You have the most popular single media figure, superstar, whatever
at the time,
on the planet, and he refuses to say anything because business interests. It's obviously an extremely contentious issue for any number of reasons, and I don't know. It just seems clear to me that Kotaku, for example, had a story that they left up about this. About, I think a similar thing was donate to these aid groups. Here's where to speak up for Palestinians, etc.
Humanitarian links and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that it was just, I don't know. It can seem obviously unsupportive of the employees or spineless in one way or the other. But that's what I thought of. Is I thought that whoever's funding this was like, let's just not touch it.
Yeah, and it's obviously such a touchy topic in so many ways, and you never know where people are going to like fall on the issue too. So like to some degree, you kind of understand, the hesitancy of like being like, hey, maybe we stick to video games or whatever, right? Like if you're in the higher levels, but it's like, again, it's just nice to see like a big co-signed medium piece, and there's the signatures at the bottom, and it's like 50 employees or something like that, and so that just took a lot of bravery, I think, and it's nice to see some editorial integrity in the industry.
Well, I think there's a lot more we could say about a lot of this and about journalism and like all that kind of stuff, and but we should move on.
Sure. Wait, I thought we were going to solve this crisis, Patrick. Wait, you're cutting us off?
It's about ethics and games journalism.
Exactly.
That's another talk for another day.
Truly.
But we're going to take a break right now because that's the end of our news and rumors section. And when we come back, we're going to be talking with Adam and Joe all about their experiences working in the guides industry and getting all into that when we come back. All right, we are back, and this week our topic is going to be strategy guides, game walkthroughs, that sort of thing. But we're talking about it largely from the industry aspect, and that's why we have our wonderful guests, Adam and Joe, on. Y'all have, as I understand it, both worked in this field, and would love for y'all to just kind of introduce yourself, and in particular, your background with writing or contributing to strategy guides, so that we know a little bit about that before we dig into the specifics.
Yeah,
you first, my friend.
Yeah, I stumbled into that industry in 2004. Actually, the story is that Joe and I are both pretty deeply embedded into the fighting game community back then. We were both just arcade morons who were going to the arcade, every day, every other day to play fighting games, and we were going to tournaments like across the country to go just play and hang out with our friends, basically. And a guy named James Chen, who's well known in the fighting game community, is a commentator. He actually just emailed me and a friend of mine named Mark Rogoyski out of the blue to work on the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection book in 2004, which is a compilation of Street Fighter Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. And Austin, Texas was actually a Third Strike hub back in the day. Einstein's Arcade, when it was still around, was a Third Strike hub.
Rip.
Yeah. And so they contacted us because they knew that, Austin was a hub, and they just needed to find somebody to work on the Third Strike section of that book. So the funny part of that story is that they gave us I think it was 1 week to write the entire guidebook. And it was not a reasonable schedule at all. And it is full of errors, in fact, because it wasn't a reasonable schedule. But funny enough, though, there were not very many good fighting game books back then. Like the very first good fighting game book was probably the Street Fighter Alpha 2 book back in the day.
Versus books.
Yeah, and that had a lot of fighting game players that were involved with that one. But after that, there wasn't much. And so we came in and we wrote the book. And even though it had some errors, people were really appreciative of that. And that book is still kind of a hot item on eBay, which is surprising to me still.
Yeah, what was the price you saw before we started rolling?
I saw someone selling it for about $100 on eBay, but now I'm actually seeing other entries. It goes as high as $180 for a guidebook. And that's really surprising. But we wrote that entire guide in, I think, a week. We went right out to Evo the very next week, and then missed the entire editing period and error check period, which is why it's full of errors. And we didn't know that we were supposed to be there for that. But funny enough, the book did really well, and they actually hired me back. And Mark Rogoyski didn't really want to write books anymore after that, so I stuck around and kept writing books. And so I wrote a couple of other fighting game books after that, and I did stuff all across the board, lots of different games. I did Digimon World 4, I think. I did WWE Day of Reckoning.
Oh, nice.
First few books. Yeah. But then I started moving into more fighting game books, and then even role-playing games later.
And you did some Castlevania books as well, right?
I did. I worked on the Castlevania Portrait of Ruin book, which...
with me.
Yeah, Joe helped me out with, too. And then the Castlevania Order of Ecclesia book as well.
Nice.
But then we worked on the Street Fighter. What is it? I can't even remember the book's called. It's the Alpha 3 collection book, right, Joe?
Yeah. Let me take over for a second here. First of all, Adam's not giving himself enough credit. The reason that James Chen reached out to Adam Deats and Mark Rogoyski is because Mark Rogoyski was one of the best Third Strike players in the country at the time. Yeah, and Adam was unequivocally, Adam is brilliant at labbing out combos and coming up with creative stuff. I mean, he was a decent competitive player, but in terms of making combo videos and trick videos and tech videos, and this YouTube didn't exist. It was I don't even know if there was crap like E-Bombs World. It was basically just people file sharing stuff to each other with bad compression. Yeah. So they're 200-300 megabytes. Adam was one of the best combo video makers ever. And he wouldn't say that, but I will. That's how he got noticed. So Adam's making combo videos and stuff. He's playing in the Texas scene. Mark Rogoyski, who's an old friend of ours, is one of the best Third Strike players in the country. That's how they got reached out to. At the same time, so I grew up in arcades, and this is going to sound weird, but the Versus Alpha 2 strategy guide changed my life. It was, I think the editor,
like the community in general just loved that book, and we all remembered it very fondly.
Of course. And the reason was that came out in like 1996-ish. Editor was Matt Schaefer for Versus Books. It was the first guy that kind of got a lot of quote unquote pro players like Alex Valle, Jason Cole, John Choi to contribute. And when it was 1996, 97, and I'm like the best guy in the arcades I go to. But then I get this book that has all this stuff I've never thought about. And I went, wow, this is, there's stuff I'm not aware of. And it had coverage of one of the first big fighting game tourneys, which was referred to as B3. In the back of the book, it talked about the tournament and legendary final set between Valle and Choi. And I didn't know any of these people. I mean, I'm in South Texas. So that made me realize, I'm a big fish in a small pond. I might be one of the best players in San Antonio, but this is all over the place.
It was a magical moment, wasn't it? Like that, like just getting like this random book off a shelf that for a game you like, and you hear about this history you just don't even know about.
And I devoured it. And then shortly thereafter, in the late 90s and early aughts, the Cannon brothers and Seth Killian and Derek Daniels and a bunch of other OGs founded Shoryuken.com. And then that became a meeting place and the kind of origins of what's thought of as the modern FGC. So I was very active on there in the early stages. I was a big tournament organizer in Texas. I helped put together a lot of tournaments in South Texas and San Antonio and Austin. And then I also helped people like Chris Chu and Javi Moreno run the Texas Showdown tournaments, which was the first time that people from the coasts started visiting other places. This is in like 2000. That was kind of my entree into the scene. But even before that, in the late 90s, there was this forum called orochinagi.net. And it was an SNK fan, Adam's smiling. This is an SNK fan forum where people would come talk about KOF games and stuff, right? And at the time, the main fighting game forums, people mostly still met up on IRC, which people aren't even going to know what that means. But yeah, basically a chat program for 100 people at a time.
You have one person who is an active IRC member. That's me. I was an IRC all the time.
Yeah, we're all old. We're all boomers. So So there was IRC.
Very small Gen Z audience this podcast has.
Zennials, I think. Zennials.
Yeah,
is
sure.
The taxonomy. But alt games SF2 on IRC was the main place fighting game players at the time met up. So then they found Shoryuken.com. But before that, there was orochinagi.net, long since defunct. There was also streetfighter.net, long since defunct. So I'm active on those forums and I'm talking trash with people. We're all like late teens, so we're just absolutely awful people. Just insufferable.
Yeah.
I know everything. I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. The young male experience. I'm talking trash with these guys. And then the first like regional tournaments start happening where people are actually traveling instead of just staying in their city. And the Texas, I don't think it was Texas Showdown 1. I think there was a big University of Houston regional run by Chris Chu and Javi Moreno before then. And there was a bowling alley at U of H that had an arcade on one side. And they ran a tournament on that side. And so that's the first time I really went outside of my city. I go to U of H. And I don't even realize I'm meeting people. Where I realize I'm meeting people is later when I leave. And of course I go being like, I'm going to fuck these people up. And do awful. The quintessential tournament virgin experience.
Right.
And I go back online and everyone's posting tournament logs and stuff, their experience. I went to this U of H tournament. I saw these guys. This guy was incredible, blah, blah, blah. And I see somebody describing their match with me in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And I'm like, wait a second. You're talking about playing me. Who are you? And it was Adam. And we realized, because this is on Orochinagi, this isn't even Shoryuken forums yet. So then we realized, we've been like at each other's throats online for like a year. Like, you're an idiot. You don't know anything about these games. You're a scrub. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
then we met up, and it was like stuff changed, and then that was me. You're talking
and then you're
about
just
me.
like, you play Street Fighter so well. You're such a good friend. You just immediately
well, after that, it was like, wait, where are you? And he's like, I'm in Austin. And it's like, okay, where do you play in Austin? He said, Einstein's. And then I learned about Einstein. So then I start going every weekend for years. I drive up to Austin from San Antonio. I start hanging out with Mark. I start hanging out with all the Austin, Mark and Adam and all the Austin people. And then it just, is lifelong friendships formed, but we're all sparring partners and we're running tournaments and then we're going traveling and stuff. So that was how we met. But also at the time, I've always been a writer. I studied writing. I always, you grow up as like a precocious 11-year-old reading Stephen King, being like, I'm going to be this, like anybody who likes writing that's our age. And you get older and you go like, oh, I'm not going to be Stephen King. But I was always writing stuff. And then when the forums started coming together, I'm not like an intuitive player. I would write guides to myself. So
yeah, I did the same actually.
Yeah, that's how I needed to bake it into my firmware, is I needed to type up a plan of myself. But I was trying to build up the community once I realized, oh, we're not as good as we thought. I'm trying to build up San Antonio. I'm trying to make myself better, make my sparring partners better. I would share those guides online. And then, so that I think that Adam told you how he got into it, but the way I got into it was Adam knew that I loved to write and that I had those guides already. And then, so when he had an opening, he reached out to me and said, hey, you want to help me? He mentioned that the first guy we did together was the Alpha Anthology. That was my first one.
Yeah, I have a date. It was 2006. So it was 2 years after that first book. And I was having trouble finding people to help me out with stuff, and Joe was around, and I felt like he just had the mind for it. And so I hired him on to do that. And we worked together on numerous books after that for years. Too many to even, I can't even remember them most of the time, but it was like Virtua Fighter 4?
5.
Right? It was a 5? I can't even remember.
We eventually worked on almost every franchise you could name together.
Yeah.
We worked on Soul Calibur, we worked on Tekken, we worked on Virtua Fighter, we worked on Street Fighter, we worked on Marvel vs. Capcom, KOF.
When you say you worked on these, you worked on written strategy guides that you could purchase at
official
the
guides.
bookstore.
That's right.
Official guides.
Official
what are the
guides.
company names? Like, it sounded kind of informal. Like somebody was like, hey, write this guide in a week, the first opportunity you had. But like, was it kind of loose like that in the early days, or was it contracts?
No, it was all contractual through Bradygames. So that first one was a little bit loosey goosey for sure. But I mean, after that, I was a Bradygames man, for a while.
They had to lock that shit down.
Yeah.
So the two big players in this space, which is why we're here, for 2 decades, were Bradygames and Prima Games. Bradygames was founded. The game's like the name is like literally like Tom Brady, not Tom Brady. It's like, I don't know, Patrick Brady, Richard Brady. You can Wikipedia this.
I bet it's Tom Brady.
It's that Tom Brady. The founder of Bradygames wanted there to be Microsoft Flight Simulator guides in like the 80s. So he founded a company to write guides about it. I don't know the origin for how Prima got started is a concern, but inevitably they were the market leaders, and the way that it would happen was, at this point, there were hundreds of guides being written a year. I mean, it was a big industry, and it was before there was things that would kind of take the place of needing tips like a GameFAQs or YouTube or what have you. So if you wanted to dive inside the game, that's where you could go. They would bid on games against each other. Okay?
Yeah, I was going to ask you like how that worked with working with the company.
Right. I felt like that's what you were asking.
Yeah.
Adam got approached by James Chen, and I think Artavan, right? Magestros.
Well, no, I might be misremembering this, but he was involved with the Super Turbo side of that first book, I think, slightly. And then on the Capcom Fighting Jam book later, I asked him to come aboard. But I might be misremembering that, but I think he came aboard to help out with that.
Yeah, you're right. But my point is that you got kind of like a point of entry into Bradygames, right?
Yep.
Bradygames and Prima were fierce rivals. So if you were a writer who was being approached as a freelancer to do work for these companies, it was kind of verboten to go with the other one. which is why Adam said he was like a Brady Games man. So there was a stable of regular writers at Brady Games, and there was a stable of regular writers at Prima Games at the time. And then just by the exigencies of how the licenses worked out, like Prima always had the Nintendo licenses. So for example, Adam never got to work on any Nintendo stuff because he was always at Brady Games. We did the Street Fighter Alpha anthology book in 2006, which is a collection of all the Street Fighter Alpha games. But right after that, Prima outbid Brady for the Capcom license, right? So all of a sudden we realized, oh shit, I was hyped to get approached by Adam. Hey, you want to help me on this Street Fighter official guide? Hell yes, I do. And then we lose Capcom, right?
Right.
So right after I do Street Fighter Alpha anthology, I actually go to the editor-in-chief of Brady Games, who is a wonderful woman. Adam and I both know, named Lee Davis. And I said, hey, this was a really cool experience doing this book. I was playing a lot of Final Fantasy 11 online at the time, and I was like a world-class player in that MMO.
Yeah.
Don't play MMOs, kids. Please don't.
Yeah.
But I was like a world-class player, and they had guides for FF11 that were garbage. And I was just honest. I was like, your guides for FF11 are garbage. I could make them better. I could make them high level. And she said, well, we're not going to do another FF11 guide, but do you want to write the guide for Final Fantasy 12? And I said, well, yes, I do. And then it was off to the races, right? Because the most important thing to these people, all right, Adam alluded to this with the timetable. The timetables were punishing y'all.
Terrible.
I mean,
how early would you get the games before release?
This is going to tie in later to how the industry died. Yeah. So it was as tight as you can imagine. So the reality is, for a printed supplement for a game to be successful in the Western market, you need to come out day and date, right?
Right.
The game's out in a GameStop, in a Babbage's, in an EB, whatever at the time. An aunt, mom, grandma, whoever's going to buy the games steps up. I'm buying this from my son, nephew, whoever. They say, do you want to get the guide? 15% off. That's guide sales, right? That's where they are. If you're not there day one, not worth printing the guide. And Adam and I both worked on guides where we realized that, well, our betters realized we're not going to make it, or it's not going to be worth printing. And we will have written a guide, and they're just like, we're not going to publish this.
Yeah.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but like,
please do.
I can totally see that being true across the board, but was that mostly also true for like single player games like Final Fantasy 12 versus like a fighting game or something, where people might want to then come get a guide after they realize they want to get good? You know what I mean? Or is this doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
That's a great question.
Well, what's Adam going to say?
That's a great question. So in most cases, it always matters. It always improves sales dramatically. However, there were some fighting game books, that we did that sold pretty well after the fact. And that's just because of the fighting game community buying them. Yeah. But Joe is right in that those first day in-store sales were absolutely mattered above all else. They were so much bigger than everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're asking about the timetables, and this is a big part of the reason why the industry waned and eventually failed. It used to be the case when we got started in the mid-aughts that games were finished 3, 4, 5 months ahead of time, right? So that meant we could
get a different world now, right?
Night and day. That meant you could have a month, 2 months, 3 months where, okay, well, we're ready for you to look at this game in a more or less finished state to put together this supplement. And at the time, there were hundreds of these things being, like, Brady Games would print a couple hundred a year. Prima would print a couple hundred a year. There were little boutique outfits here and there that would do a few guides. And you would kind of have the time. It's still punishing. You're still working double full time. I promise you it's hard to write a trade paperback volumes worth of 200, 300, 400 printed pages, which is the equivalent of 3 or 4 novels worth of text. You have to get to the game, something people would probably find very interesting. And I've gotten people asking me, even recently, this is like 2 years after this isn't a thing for me, what do the game companies give you?
Yeah, that was
and the answer is access. They're there are exceptions where they gave us materials. Like Adam and I did a Portrait of Ruin guide for Castlevania, and Konami gave us tons of good shit.
Yeah, they were incredibly gracious and just gave us everything.
Yeah. But for the most part, what you can expect is access to the game, and that's it.
Yeah. Right.
And everything that you make is up to you.
And that's incredibly problematic for big, giant role-playing games.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah,
how can you
every
beat
single chest is and everything like that.
Oh, and how could you beat it 5 times and with the different character classes
with games with extremely hidden stuff in it as well?
Didn't you work on like Tales of Vesperia Namco games where that was a nightmare, Adam?
Yes, Tales of the Abyss. We had no help, and so we had. Yeah, luckily, I actually did manage to clean out that game for the most part. I think I got everything pretty much worked out. Mm-hmm. But we also did like Star Ocean 4. And that was a nightmare because that game is full of secrets.
It's so interesting to me hearing you guys talking about, especially earlier when you guys were talking about just getting started and how it's, you guys were just fans. You guys just played these games a lot and were known as like really good players. And that's how you got the gig. It's like from my perspective, like when I was a kid and I was buying strategy guides and shit, it was like, you assumed that this was made by the people who made the games, And I think a lot of that too is I was a big like Nintendo Power reader. And so like a lot of like the Nintendo official guides like were made in-house. You know what I mean? Like that was, you said Prima had the rights to the Nintendo stuff and they were doing the non-Nintendo Power versions. Right. But it's like, that's something that's kind of surprising to me to hear is like how much is just like, hey, you're just really fucking good at this. Can you tell other people how to do it?
Yeah, I think that the thing about being really good at a fighting game is that if you're really good at fighting games, you can be really good at any game. Like you can crack the mechanics.
You understand systems and whatnot.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And so the fact that we could crack games quickly and the fact that we were reliable and trustworthy, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
Companies go out and they try to get help from the gamer community and they frequently get bitten on the ass by people who share stuff, leak stuff. I'm telling you, it's very hard to deliver books worth of content stories. In a month or two. This job took years off my life.
Maybe I have a question about that of like, I know, question for you, Joe or Adam, saying that you're writing these guides and I understand you're writing the text. Just curious about what the other scope of the job is. Are you editing it too? Are you doing any of the page layout or are you just doing fucking everything?
We had people who did page layout. But we had kind of like templates within Word and stuff that would do dummy layout. And then we had a real layout. People put in the final stuff in copy or whatever, but for publishing. But, a thing that people probably find interesting is at this point, it's pedestrian to do capture. You're capturing this on OBS probably. There's a few years, for the last few years, there's been stuff like Elgato that were very easy consumer solutions. Me and Adam can remember having to get into rabbit holes of like, how do we, the earliest guys would set up old camcorders like in a mount at the TV. And take video.
The Final Fantasy Tactics guide I have is like clearly photos of a monitor screen. Yeah.
And all the early capture solutions were imperfect and unwieldy and difficult, and we had to deal with that at the time. So we're producing all the images. Frequently, the art was produced from those images. The art that's used in the guides was literally just blown up assets from whatever captures we could take. So that's kind of interesting.
I was always surprised, Joe, that how much control they wanted us to have over the placement of screenshots and such. Because like we were supposed to actually go through the text and call them out as needed and take the shots and like kind of direct that to a sense.
Well, that's you and I changed guides in a way, because like I remember getting on with you and you were like, oh, well, they got this format and each character layout needs 2 or 3 screens and the spreads need to be arrayed this way. And I would say, well, what if this needs more or less discussion? And they're like, oh, well, they want it this much. And I was like, well, I don't give a shit. And plus arguing for things like more granular data from devs, whether we farm it or we're given it like frame data and whatnot.
Right.
It's so funny because, like, I mean, Joe could say this, but like, they were perfectly happy in most instances for fighting games, for example, to just do move lists with nice pictures in it for decades. But to their credit, Brady Games was literally when I came around, and then when Joe was involved, they really wanted to up the quality of that stuff, and they actually aimed to do that. And so they were really worked with us to like get stuff like frame data, and they allowed us to have actual write-ups for characters talking about strictly strategy and all that stuff. And so that was always probably the most fulfilling part of the whole thing, which is that they really cared about what we were doing, and we did it as well as we could.
Well, that was the joke, right? People would say, oh, these are just move lists. But when we started doing more in-depth stuff, it started selling better, and it improved the cachet of the company.
Yeah.
Like these people, these guys are actually good.
I can say just from personal experience, like as a fan of strategy guides, like I was the kind of kid that like wanted a strategy guide for every game I had. I've got strategy guides for like the Donkey Kong Country games. Like you don't really need a strategy guide for that. I just like looking at the pictures and reading about the characters, right? But it's all the extra stuff. Yeah. You know, because I was also a big game magazine subscriber kid. So it was like, it's all the extra stuff around it that makes you just want to keep flipping, even if you're not like actively looking up strategy stuff, you know, like for instance, the Myst strategy guides, the strategy guide for Myst and Riven were like written in like a first person perspective of like somebody writing in their journal, like, and their experience on this island. You know, it was like such a fun. I loved that stuff. It was just fun to read, you know, like, and that kind of stuff really kept me in.
I can tell you a comment and a funny story about what you just said. So one,
please do.
I think that what a game guide is kind of misunderstood, right? Like you guys are going to want to talk to us at some point about, oh, well, how did it fail? I bet it failed because of YouTube and GameFAQs and whatever. And that doesn't have the slightest bit to do with why it failed. It's a different reason, which is interesting on its own. What they're best understood as, game guides, is as a piece of merch. So it's a bit of a category error. These are not solution supplements. They are nostalgia pieces. Yes. So you've got that Myst guide, right? Now, everything people have talked about, like the attention economy, right? We are not really, companies aren't really fighting for your dollars, they're fighting for your time. So replaying a beloved game might take dozens of hours. If you want to relive a beloved album or movie, it takes you a couple hours. A game might take you, I want to play Final Fantasy VI on the Super Nintendo. It's going to take me 60 hours. I don't have time for that. But I can pick up that Nintendo Power official Final Fantasy III guide, like you're talking about, David, and I can flip through it and I can get a bit of that dopamine hit of nostalgia of like, this is what this game was like. This is what this period of my life was like. That's why people buy game guides.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the Myst guide right here.
Yeah. And so, hey, tell me who the author on that is.
Rick Barbara and Russell DeMaria.
Rick Barba is the grandfather of strategy guides, and
nice.
A funny story about that period of the guide era. So the main writers at that time were Rick Barba and Bart Farkas and a few other people, but at the time, the contracts were written so that it was like a contract that Dean Koontz or Stephen King would have gotten, meaning there is a royalty built into the contract. Right? It's not work for hire. So when a few guides like the first Sims guide and the Doom guide and the Myst guide sold hundreds of thousands of copies, these guys make shitloads of money on a game guide. Now, good for them. I know some of these people, but nobody's buying the game guide because your name's on it. So the publishing companies,
not like a Stephen King or a Dean
Koontz. Right. The publishing companies went, oh crap, maybe we shouldn't write these contracts the same way.
Right.
And so after that, they changed everything to basically freelancer work for hire. So all that stuff Adam and I did was like, well, I give you this work and now I have no ownership of it. So if we did guides that did really well, it didn't matter. Like, you know, I wrote a bunch of Final Fantasy guides, and if I was under an 80s, 90s royalty structure, that would have been bank, but it wasn't. Yeah. But it's just funny to think about that era and how it changed. But I also think that cuts to kind of what these are for. They're really best thought of as nostalgia pieces. I mean, there's information, and once upon a time they had a monopoly on it, but the lasting value and the reason that people keep a bunch of game guides around is because they serve that kind of function. They're a piece of merch that lets you relive a bit of the experience of playing the game.
I want to ask you about that because at least that seems that way now, but like, when I was playing a game in the mid 90s or something, I wasn't buying a guide thinking 20 years ahead that I would want to revisit it, right? I was buying it because I was having trouble with that game or something. And I think now that would definitely be the case, right? Like people who are buying a guide that was printed now would be buying it because they are interested in having merch, like you're saying, right? So like, I'm trying to kind of ask, like, do you think that that's something that changed over time? Like, because now there is YouTube and GameFAQs and all that. So if somebody's buying a guide 5 or 6 years ago, they were buying it more for the longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a large part of it. Once upon a time, Nintendo Power, and hey, I was one of those kids that had the early Nintendo Power subscription. I got the free copy of Dragon Warrior because otherwise they were going to bury 1 million copies of Dragon Warrior in the desert next to E.T. True story. But once upon a time, they had the monopoly on the information. But starting in the mid-aughts, when there's the rise of things like YouTube and GameFAQs and having more widespread information, it became more of a nostalgia piece. But one way to think about this is that a successful game has to attract on the order of millions of fans. And if you are getting millions of people to look at your thing, then you create the potential for all sorts of leech industries to piggyback onto that. So there's people that make backpacks and keychains and dolls and whatnot. Guides kind of fit into that niche. So if a game is projected to sell however many millions of copies, what we would talk about in the 2010s was the attach rate. So, if it's something like a Grand Theft Auto and you get 1 out of 30 people to buy your guide, well, the game's going to sell 15, 20 million copies. More than worth doing. I think the best-selling game guide of all time was the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas guide. It made the New York Times bestseller list in nonfiction. So if the games are going to do well and you can get the licenses and you can have the time to work on them, it's worth doing. Whether it's for the information or for somebody to have just tie-in merch or a nostalgia hit. The guides that exist now to the degree that they do, because at the apogee, Prima and Brady were each competing to print about 200 guides a year. At this point, and I did a little research on this, the imprints that are left are boutique imprints like Piggyback and Future Press, and Dark Horse dabbles in this a little bit. They're kind of art and lore combos, right? It's like an art book or a lore book.
Right.
Like the last 5
the
things.
Stuff that you see at like Barnes & Noble these days.
That's right. Yeah. The last 5 things Piggyback published were for Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption 2, Breath of the Wild, Final Fantasy 15, Metal Gear Solid 5. That's their 5th most recent game guide / lore book, MGS 5. That's not recent.
Yeah.
Future Press, you got Horizon Zero Dawn, an Ori art book, a Control art book, an Animal Crossing guide, and a lore guide for Tom Clancy's Breakpoint, which I didn't even know was a thing.
So, I mean, they're picking evergreen titles to do this stuff with because they know it's going to get sales, basically.
Yeah, the number 1 best-selling guide of the last 2 or 3 years is a Breath of the Wild guide.
Right.
Yeah. But it won't ever be like it was before.
I mean, the way it was always described to me too is that like so much of the sales was predicated on like a grandmother goes into a store like a GameStop or whatever to buy the game. The guidebook's there. It's for their birthday. Why not get this nice accompanying thing that will go with the game?
Right.
It was a lot of it.
So you've alluded to the fall. Or David, do you have something before?
No. You can go first. I'll tack mine on afterwards.
If this isn't jumping ahead, you said that the industry did not fail because of free online resources to answer your question or what have you. What can you tell us a little bit about what happened? And
yeah, I think it's interesting because that's what everyone says, but it's not true. Like I said, if a successful game has to attract millions of eyeballs, if you're attracting millions of eyeballs, if you can get 10, 20, 30, 100,000 people to buy a supplement, it's worth doing it. The reason is just the exigencies of game development change so much. So you guys will know, it used to be the case that when a game went gold, it was done. Yeah. And it was gold 2-3 months before release. We need a month or two to have time to try to put together a guide. Are we going to be proud of it? It depends. But can we put out a thing that's 200, 300, 400 pages that someone might buy or be tricked into buying? All right, I have enough time. We had ones we were proud of. We had ones where we went, oh fuck. But
for sure.
The point is that we have time to do it, and then publishing lead times need 3 to 4 weeks to have a printing lead time and a shipping lead time, and you must be day and date. Now, I think Patrick, you asked about this, but in the Japanese market's a little different. In Japan, printing and shipping costs for paper products are much lower. People who work in publishing, editing, writing get paid much lower. You can have there's a whole industry there. They got incredible guides from Enterbrain, Ultimania, Famitsu. Get 1,200 page guides for some Final Fantasy games that will give you detail you didn't know existed. But it's much cheaper to do, and people support it longer. Here, you really need to be day and date. And in order to do that, we need a month lead time. Your game needs to be done. That used to be
games aren't even finished until months after they release it.
Exactly.
I mean, Cyberpunk isn't finished, and it's been out for half a year. So
two things. One, and the Cyberpunk was one of the last big game guides. So
yeah,
one is that games come in hotter and hotter. Every year that goes by, they come in hotter. You got to have a 30 gigabyte day one patch. Who knows what's going to change? And two is just the conception of a game as a commodity has changed into a game as a service. So we're going to have rolling updates. Stuff's going to change. We're going to keep adding stuff. Now, I've argued that the information was never the crucial thing. The crucial thing was you're buying a tie-in product for a thing that you love. The information was almost incidental. But the perception that, Prima makes great guides, Brady makes great guides, was kind of founded on, if you like some of the fighting game guides Adam and I grew up on, or that, you may have seen that we did, hopefully, you go, oh, wow, they really cared about this. They did a good job. This means this company does good work. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's a game that comes in flaming hot, and I have literally known guide teams where the developer said, fuck, we don't know, make it up. You guys are asking us about whether this stuff's going to be ready. What's this system work like? What's this system work like? We don't care. You're a hassle on us. Make it up. We don't care about you. You are a licensed product. And they just, what do? They just squat it out. And then that comes out. You buy that guide. You go, oh, this guide sucks. Prima sucks.
Yeah.
So it would affect the cachet of the company on the whole if you paid attention,
Right.
So the quality of the information mattered that way and giving an aura to the companies. But the reality is that the lead times crunching, games coming in hotter, and games morphing into a thing that changes over time rather than a product that was a kind of a, I don't know.
Well, like who goes to the store now to buy their game too, right? To
well,
then
that,
be tricked into buying.
I'm glad you said that, because it's the same thing driving. Oh, well, we have the collector's edition of, I don't know, Resident Evil Village, and you can get a figurine of Lady Dimitrescu or whatever. Yeah. That it's the same. It's like, how do we get people to buy physical media?
All right.
It's not so much about it's about little, add-ons and stuff.
Well, we saw the ugly head of game developers coming in super, super hot on numerous projects, even like before like the internet like update age was happening, which is that like on WWE Day of Reckoning 2, for example, the dumbest book I've ever been on by a lot. I did the I love telling his story because it's just idiotic from start to finish. But like, I did the boss fight for Triple H. He was the last boss in that game, and he was horrifically hard. And I was like, this doesn't seem finished, but you know what? I've got 1 month until this is done, so I'm writing it up. And I finished the write up. I was like, well, that took me forever to figure out like a means of beating this, but that's fine. And I found out 1 week later that the entire fight had changed dramatically. And I say 1 week later, it was actually 2 weeks later because it was 2 weeks before release. I had to rewrite the fight on top of a number of other things that changed as well. And that happened all the time. And it was getting worse and worse as the years went on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's talking about it in that the parts of the industry that have changed that affected that side of the industry, specifically the guides side of the industry, that's never really talked about, like as why it failed, because there is something like tangible. There's like a reason that books still sell. You know what I mean? And it's not just e-readers out there everywhere. You know what I mean? Like I personally, you were talking about how people buy these guides, now they act as like kind of like time capsules or nostalgia machines. But like I straight up bought the Final Fantasy Tactics guide because I was picking up Final Fantasy Tactics again and I was getting my ass handed to me and I didn't want to have to like go to some fucking IGN wiki, and like refresh my phone every once in a while. I wanted like a nice place where I could like actually check it out, So I think that even if the, overall print industry was on decline, I think that there's still, if the games industry as a whole hadn't changed, I just hadn't thought about it that way. And that makes a lot of sense.
I also think it's funny because you say that, these wikis like the IGN wiki, which is like a big resource now for guides and walkthroughs, didn't kill this industry, but they can respond in a way that books can't, right? Because you can edit
updates.
A wiki.
And there's a lot of updates these days.
So I was gonna bring that up. We tried. Adam got out a little bit a few years before I did and moved on to animation.
Though I was around for some of the internet update era, just a little bit, right at the tail end. Or
would it be like second editions, or would it just be like internet?
Well, here's the thing, like, and this is still a problem, right? Because it's hard to get people to pay for things online, and even harder when Facebook and Google hoover up, I don't know, 50-60% of what's available. How do we get people to pay for things online? But there were projects and kind of goals to pivot to. Can we get people to support apps where we would update stuff over time? Can we
Final Fantasy VII guide had that, right? Or it had like a digital element, some sort of multimedia element to it. Yeah, I thought so. Maybe I'm wrong.
Original 7?
Yeah.
No,
or it had like a CD that came with it or something. Right?
I don't think that. I don't think the original.
Maybe it was 9.
9's a legendary story. 9 Final Fantasy 9 is often cited as the worst guidebook of all time. And I feel sympathy for the guide's author because I wouldn't want to be put in that position. They were trying to launch a service called Play Online.
That's what I'm talking about. I think
They expurgated huge swaths of content out of that guide to relegate them to Play Online. And Play Online did eventually exist in a form. I think it drove Final Fantasy XI's login process and stuff. But the idea was that we were going to push people online to see. It was going to be like, you want strategy for this boss fight? Go to Play Online. And they just never did that. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what I went to go buy the guide the other day, and they were like, "There's not really a purpose because most of it never existed."
I feel for that author. I never worked with that guy, but I know that guy Dan Berlew, and he's like, there's been interviews with him where people have asked him about FF9, and he's like, "Don't talk to me about that." No comment. Not his fault, but it was supposed to be an idea. It was the protoplasm of tying in online updates with a physical guide. Right. Now we did like there was fighting game guides. The Street Fighter 4 Bible that Adam and I did with some other people. We did an app for that, and we were going to have frame data updates and stuff. We did a frame data app for Street Fighter 5 that me and Long Tran worked on. I did various guides like for I'm just Saints Row 4 and blah, 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 other stuff like that, where we would do apps and that had maps and updates for content. But here's the problem. All of your staff is freelance writers. Now you're giving them regular work because they're trustworthy and they can deliver. So there were years Adam and I did well. But at the same time, it's very punishing work, and you're moving on to these projects where it's all consuming for a month or two. Like, you need to write 100,000 words of text. You need to figure all this stuff out and write it up in a publishable format in a month or two. And now I'm like, hey, can you check on the Saints Row 4 had an update? Do you want to check on?
Right.
No. Do you want to give me a contract for that? Like, what are the terms of this?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that they did try to talk us into updating the frame data for Street Fighter 4, for example, after the fact, like after the app was already out and whatnot. The reality is that we weren't getting additional contracts to do that. And so there was no reason for us to do it. The consumers who bought it were frustrated because the app wasn't updating repeatedly over and over again for the 5 iterations of the game, and we can't do free work. So it's like, what do you do?
I mean,
you have to have an infrastructure for that.
I think game developers who come out with a game with a long-term plan to release content down the line, and then they see the player base like drastically like decrease, they're probably in the same shoes as well, where they're like, well, damn, now we're kind of just like, we assumed that this would increase the longevity of this game, and now we're just kind of like working really hard for no money, or like finishing the game rather. But
I mean, all my questions are about process related stuff. Just because Joe.
No, yeah, we haven't really talked about that. So fire away.
Like,
give them the unexpurgated version of this.
Yeah. So you're saying like your work, it's like feast or famine. So you're working really hard for a week or a whole month. And you're taking
1 to 3 months typically. Yeah.
Okay. So you're taking like all the screenshots. So I don't know how many that could be. That's probably what, like 100 or more. Thousands. So you're writing the text, you're taking all these screenshots with cool late 90s, early 2000s tech. I love it. Are you also like writing for a global audience? Does any of the strategy guides get localized in any way?
They do.
We don't do it, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's translator teams. Like, I have a abysmally bad Duke Nukem Forever guide, by the way, that's been localized into like 8 different languages. A friend of mine was in like Italy and was like, look at this Italian version of Duke Nukem Forever. And I was like, oh, you should burn that. No, but we're not thinking about that. That's handled by, localization teams.
Got it.
And
okay.
of course that's long gone. Nobody's doing that now.
Now, I just understanding the scope of what you're doing is like, so when you get to like a point in the game, you said that you might have access to the game and that's it. Where do you go? Who do you talk to?
We would have channels to ask questions, but like
the response time was terrible, because if you're dealing with Japanese companies, as Joe knows, you would get responses weeks later sometimes.
The joke Adam and I had was, if you need to ask a Japanese developer a question, it's Golden Week. Like, when is you guys heard of Golden Week? When is Golden Week?
Yeah,
Golden Week is when we need an answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And it's not, in the crunch time of getting a game prepared and gold and printed and shipped and ready, their priority is not us. And then the honest truth is that the people who would have tabulated details of stuff that we needed to know was QA people.
Yeah, I was about to say the QA team, right?
And that's right. And that process would have ended 6, 7, 8 months before. And how good were their documentation? Well, and I've seen this a lot more now because I'm in game development now, but like the further along a project gets, the worse the documentation gets.
Uh-huh.
So because
well, you're just trying to like get the thing out the door.
Just get it done.
Just get it
like
out.
we don't need to do these giant spreadsheets. Just get it done.
Yeah.
So now at the nth hour, some third party comes in and is like, hey, we need this answer for this or that. And it's like, oh, just give them that. Just give them the spreadsheet that the QA had, and it's like not up to date, and it's missing
you have
stuff.
to like parse. Yeah.
It's like it wasn't even translated half the time. Like we had to put it into fucking Google Translate to like figure anything out.
This is interesting. So back in the mid aughts to late aughts era, y'all will remember that a lot of the really big name RPGs, whether Square, Enix, whoever, they would come out in Japan a long time before. So often we would have access to the official Japanese guides, and we would just hire translators to go in there and give us all the information. That was awesome. It was too much information, really, because they had guides much bigger than we have here. If you've ever seen like an Ultimania guide, they're incredible. So it was a choice of what to include and what to disclude. But then later is, now it's pretty much in a rhythm where stuff kind of comes out. Final Fantasy games used to come out like a year and a half ahead in Japan. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah,
so when you lose that advantage,
yeah,
you lose that advantage, and you're just working with the situation we're talking about, where it's like, hey, I can't figure this late game missable quest out. Do you guys have an answer? 3 weeks go by. We print the guide sometimes, and then 2 weeks later, we get an email like, "Oh, did you need this answer?" And it's like, well, a month ago. Thank you.
I mean, I remember working on this is the dumbest project that I've ever been on, because they came to me in an emergency. They needed a book out ASAP. They had a license, and some stuff fell apart. They didn't get the game in time. Right. This is actually like the oldest story in the world for game guide writing, because it happened all the time. But it was like one of the Gundam Dynasty Warrior games, and they wanted me to write the book in, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks at the time.
You had 10 days, bro.
Dude, amazing.
I remember that.
Yeah. And then I was like, well, I guess I'm not doing anything and I need the work. So yeah, let's go. Let's just do it. And I remember I just went in cracking as hard as I could. I had no information. They gave me no documentation whatsoever. And in the first week, I actually did manage to finish the main campaign story and write-ups for most of it. And I just had some loose ends to wrap up with secrets and stuff. But when I finished the game, and then I went to a specific part of the menu and clicked a couple of things, a new story prompt came up, and I realized that there was another 10 characters that opened up. No one told me about this. No one knew about it. There was nothing that I could do. And so I had to go to Leigh Davis, Commander-in-Chief of Bradygames at the time, and go, listen, so yeah, I finished the first, 10 characters. It turns out there's 10 additional characters. This is what's happening. Can I get more time? And they were like, no, we're going to cancel the project.
Oh, no.
The book was dead. And then from then on, I had to negotiate like how much I was going to get paid for that week of work, basically.
Well, it's a good lesson, I'd imagine, out of that. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
When they come to you that hot, unless you are unbelievably desperate, don't take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my process related questions, all of these questions are around the idea of like, Joe, Adam, you and Joe have been saying like, yo, you write these guides in 10 days, but there's all these other tasks that you're doing. You're sending emails, you're sending text messages, you're waiting, you're talking with an editor, looking at QA documentation. It's so much work.
You're playing the game.
Yeah, you're playing the game. You're probably playing the game, pausing, taking a screenshot, writing, and probably the cycle repeats. But just wanted to take some time to highlight that you guys did like tons of hard work, and like is probably really cool and hard at times.
I would, for me personally, and it's easier to do this in retrospect, and the longer I got in the career, because I did this almost 15 years, so I probably would say I mismanaged my time in a way the first 10 years, and I was better the last 5 years. But it was super cool to be so embedded and trusted by so many companies. I mean, I have their protected IPs in my home or whatnot. We got to go to a lot of studios. I've worked at most of the big studios that make games. We didn't really talk about the changeover from Brady to Prima. So very briefly, Penguin and Random House were two different, obviously, publishing umbrellas. Brady was under one, Prima was under another. I forget, I think around 2014, 15, they merged partially to be better able to combat Amazon. And so it became Penguin Random House. And then at that point, Brady and Prima were redundant. Mm-hmm. So the Prima name was kept because Prima had slightly larger market share. But the reality is it was mostly the Brady staff that survived. So Adam was done by then, but I went from being one of Brady's main authors to one of Prima's main authors. But Prima had always had the Nintendo contract. So we never did Nintendo books, but suddenly the Prima Bradygames merger happens. It becomes just Prima. Suddenly I get to do a bunch of Nintendo stuff. Suddenly I'm going out to the Nintendo headquarters and having my own office there and getting to play games way in advance. And to the earlier points about that every game now comes in scorching hot, like just a meteorite. They're lucky if they work on day one. Nintendo's the exception to that rule.
Yeah.
Super Mario Odyssey was as polished as it is now 6 months before release. I mean, they get stuff that, I think, was it Patrick or Matt? Somebody said at the top of the show, like talking about maybe there's something that's fairly well along.
Yeah.
Done.
The rumors that 2D Metroid's done.
I wouldn't doubt it because I have personally seen Nintendo have stuff that was just a Nintendo level of polish, top tier, best software development company in the world done that they just sit on for a year.
Yeah, well, they're super strategic about their releases, and so and they've got a wealth of IP, so it like makes sense that they really sit on them and wait for the time to go. That's got to be really nice then to not only be working on such great games, but to like have the time you need.
Yeah, I mean that was super exciting. I can't even. What was the prompt for this, Matt? I'm sorry.
Just like what it's like to go ahead.
Yeah, the day in day out of the work and like how the work
to sketch it out like very broadly. And I think Adam would agree with me. You would have to spend the first if it would depend on how much time you had, obviously, and you would know: do I have a month? Do I have 6 weeks? Do I have 2 months? Do I have 2 weeks? But you would spend the first, let's say, quarter of that binging on the game. You're not doing anything. Right? You're just like, I need to grok this product. I'm plowing through it. I'm immersed in it. It was double, triple full-time work. I definitely put in 80, 100-hour weeks, lots of all-nighters, screwed up my eyes, screwed up my allergies, gave myself weird flus. It was hard.
Very frequently, you have to work on location, too, because they wanted to protect the game, make sure it didn't leak. And so, like Joe can tell you that we had there was a 2 to 3 month stint on numerous occasions where I was in a hotel room in Indianapolis across the street from Brady Games. And I was just living in that hotel for that long. And that's a weird part of my life that, I can't get back. Like just every night, the only thing keep me sane is like getting a drink at the hotel bar and then going up to my room and then putting on the TV and then playing Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow.
Adam's drinking at the hotel bar. I'm getting a weed hookup in Indianapolis. We would be at each other's throats by the end of some of these projects. For sure. We're such good friends, but we wouldn't speak to each other for like 6 months after some of these
stress.
Things.
Like
but I don't know. The beginning part of it was just immersing in like, oh God, I need to get an idea of what all we need to cover as much as I can and plow through it. And then after that, it was just getting down to work of like breaking stuff into parts and we need what is the table of contents, right? That's your beginning. Yeah. And then like, what do we need to do to fulfill each of those things? And
the table of contents was frequently the most daunting part because you're creating it and then you have to stare at it and realize that this is the abyss that you're going to be looking at.
Yeah. For like that's the outline. Right.
And for smaller games, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, you could just get organized and make it happen. But for RPGs, those were organizational disasters because they were so hard to get organized and they were daunting to get through too. Yeah. And the worst shit is every RPG, and I'm going to say this out loud right now, fuck every RPG that has content that's locked out after a certain point.
Missable.
Missable content. Eat shit. I hate you. You made guide.
The funny thing is that's what you would get a guide for. And then if we drop that ball, you're like, this guide company sucks.
Yeah. Like in a few instances, we had to write like a little aside that was provided by the company itself, like a week before it was supposed to go out, that it kind of like loosely explains what to do. But we didn't actually do it ourselves because we missed it.
I did kind of want to talk just a little bit about, because you, Joe, were talking about the kind of the modern equivalent of this like nostalgia factor is like the collector's editions, right? And that's when you see a lot of printed material coming out with games, and a lot of those are often very, I don't want to say bespoke, but it's like, it's for a more niche audience. It's like the limited release games, and it's these like collector's editions and whatnot. I think that we've seen a lot of smaller releases in surrounding games in the games industry, like for instance, like vinyl, like video game soundtracks on vinyl has kind of become a pretty like niche industry, but also like they keep production to a small enough level to where it stays profitable. And I find that to be really fascinating and really cool. And it's especially it's not for people, you know, who are like in their like teens and 20s who like want to buy the Katamari Damacy soundtrack on vinyl, right? Like at Mondo. And like it's for people who were fans of it when they were kids. So do you think you see like in the future something that like that happening with strategy guides, with reprints, or just selling them, like you were saying, as like nostalgia machines, as ways to kind of like reinvigorate some of that industry?
Well, I just sheer realities of how the games themselves get made and come in so hot. I don't know. I feel like any vestige of what the industry was is done. But
right.
to what you're talking about, I mean, what exists now, apart from the 5 or 6 titles that Future Press and Piggyback do a year, is kind of what you're talking about with what Dark Horse is doing. Is kind
art
of these
books, the lore books, that kind of thing.
That's right. The tie-in art books, lore books, they're a little more timeless. They're not as tied to being out on day one and getting tie-in purchases with GameStop saying, "Oh, you buying the game, get the guide for X% off." To the extent that it exists, it's going to be stuff like that. And I did like the analogy you drew. I didn't realize you're talking about explicitly game soundtracks on vinyl. What I was thinking about is that there's an audiophile market that's resurgent in vinyl for exactly the reasons you said.
Mm-hmm.
It's an aging audience that kind of has a heyday of a bygone era, and they kind of want to recapture it. And there are audio properties in vinyl that are different from what you get from an M4A or MP3.
But I think at the end of the day, mostly people just like to be able to hold something in their hands, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so it's still going to exist. There will still be supplements you can get. Now they're going to be for either the coolest non AAA games of the year, like something like an Ori or Hades.
Right.
Or they'll be for the AAA. You'll be Horizon Zero Dawn and Cyberpunk. But in terms of the kind of like, and we've seen this kind of like in our lifetimes, the last 10, 15, 20 years, the mid list of every type of media has been stripped out. So you're either the absolute top tier of content, which for movies would be something like Marvel and other franchise stuff, or you're relatively indie, right? And the middle is gone. The middle is gone from games.
There's no Kramer versus Kramer coming out anymore.
Yeah, that's right. So in games, the equivalent is, so Adam and I were game crunchers where it's like, oh, you guys are good. You guys can deliver. You guys are skilled players. You can figure stuff out quickly, but also you can deliver us these products and you're reliable and trustworthy. Well, okay. You guys do these DS RPGs and PSP RPGs, and Adam and I both did tons of those. Like what kept us compelled was the idea that we get to do all the fighting game guides. And at this point, nobody has ever published more fighting game published official content than I have, and Adam's close behind. And that's just not going to ever change now. And I'm proud of that.
Right.
But in between, that doesn't pay, that's like 15 books stretch across 15 years. In the middle of that, keeping us busy in the meantime was, oh, do you want to do a guide for Adam did like a tactics?
I did.
Ogre battle?
No. I did Final Fantasy Tactics, the PSP version of War of the Lions, which I actually loved because I love that game and I knew it well. So it was actually a super easy guidebook to get through. And it was the same for like the Castlevania games and then the Tales games as well, which I also liked.
You did a bunch of those. So, but I did like, oh, do you want to do the guide for Dragon's Quest Monsters Joker 2, which is a real title of a video game? And it's like, well, no, I don't, but you don't have a thing I'd rather do and you're paying me well for this? Sure. Give me Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 2.
Dude, I know. I did the guidebook for Area 51, I think.
Oh my God. That is awesome.
So that's all, it's all gone now. You know what I mean? It's either
there's
like
not
an
going to be a guide
sensation
for
or AAA.
Yeah, there's going to be no guide. There's going to be no collector's edition strategy guide for like WWE 2K19 or whatever, right?
Absolutely
like Day of Reckoning, like that is never going to happen again.
Yeah.
So, like David said, we've gone kind of long, and this is really fascinating. So that's totally great. But this might push us even a little further, but I thought it might be fun as a last discussion point or one of the last discussion points here to kind of talk about the use of guides from the perspective of y'all, and then also hear from Matt and David as well. Because I think back to like 1994 when I got King's Quest 7.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I got the guide with it, right? And I don't know if you guys ever played any of these Sierra guides. They used to have these things where you had a little decoder and you could use the decoder on your hint book. And it had varying levels of hints, right? Like, so the first one might give you a look at the waffle iron or something like that, right? Or maybe even more vague than that, like a pun or something. And I just remember using it so much that the game wasn't fun. That, like, you know, every puzzle was like solved and like, and so I'm kind of curious about, you know, the idea of like guides can really enhance your play through of a game and they can really detract from it. Like like the flip side for me was a couple, maybe not even a year ago, playing through Hollow Knight, where I kind of got stuck and then I got to a guide, and then that helped me actually like really fall in love with that game, right? So I've had the experience with both, and I think that's somewhat on the user, but I'm also kind of curious from the perspective of people who've worked on them. You know, like, do you have stories either as Matt and David of like, yeah, this, when I used a guide, it was a good experience, or when it's a bad experience, or do y'all have thoughts about when you're writing a guide? How do you not just take the magic out of the game?
You know, this might be a leap, but I almost feel like this ends up falls in line with the conversations happening about difficulty in games as well, which is like, how much do you want to devote to playing the game optimally and well, right? And the reality is that I think there's just a lot of different people with a lot of different tastes for the level at which that they want to like spoil the game's technical side, and to some degree, you know, like my fiance, for example, she cares about the story in a game more than anything else. She just wants to know what the narrative stuff is, and she wants to see the cinematics and stuff. And so she doesn't care about spoiling it. She wants to go look up a guide if it's going to help her get through that stuff. And in fact, she very much does not care about playing it that well, and so I think for her it's a different experience. But for me, I will never look up guidebooks for, you know, I played Demon's Souls recently and I stupidly did not bother to look up any guidebook stuff. And I played the entire game with Black Tendency because I was dying in every single realm. And that was awful. And I feel dumb about that. But that's, you know, that's just the way I wanted to play it. I wanted to experience it without knowing anything at all, you know?
I thought about what you're talking about, Patrick, whenever I was putting together those kind of guides where the content mechanics were important, but the story was too. I was always very mindful. The one thing I will say about this weird fake job that we had for a long time is that we had a staggering amount of authorial control. Like I took a lot of pride in trying to put out good stuff. And obviously it was mostly, I took the most pride in the fighting game stuff, but when I was doing other stuff, I took pride in that too. And if, I don't know, I've seen guides like the Final Fantasy VII guide just straight up has like a picture of Aerith getting run through by Sephiroth. And if you could flip to that page, you'd be like, oh shit. Right. Yeah. So I was mindful of that. I wanted to provide a big problem of organizing these things, especially under the gun of time, is organization to make it a useful reference. Right. And ideally, you would think about all that and you'd put together an index and blah, blah, blah. The reality is I never had time for that shit. So I was mindful of that. I never wanted, if I was writing through a narrative walkthrough, I never wanted to spoil big beats. I never put in screenshots. I was pretty proud of some guys. I even did a Dead Rising 3 guide at the Xbox One launch. And there's some pretty big twists at the end of that game. And I was like, I'm not showing this. I'm not showing this. I'm not showing this. Here are the solutions. But I know what would be exciting as a fan of that franchise. I know what would be exciting to see and what I wouldn't want someone to just dump on me like a cold bucket of water. So I was mindful of that, but not everyone was. And it was kind of just who's writing the book you're buying. Like, you don't know, you're just buying the company's book. And, but I was mindful of that, but it was a challenge putting those things together, whether you were thinking about that at all and whether you could actually incorporate worrying about that into part of your process. What is the purity of the experience for this reader? And my ideal was that I wasn't going to ruin any narrative part of the experience for people, but my ideal was also, I always looked to those Innerbrain, Famitsu, Ultimania, Japanese guides, which If you guys have never seen those, pick your favorite Final Fantasy game at random and order on eBay the Ultimania guide for that game. I promise you will. Make sure you're not
They're
wearing
insane.
socks because they're going to be blown off of your feet. Oh my God.
They have like number data for every single goddamn thing in the game. Like any sort of calculation you're looking for, it's all covered. Everything.
Yeah. I've definitely flipped through some of those. But yeah, I it's something that you guys were just talking about, and it's encouraging to hear that like you guys put thought into that, right?
Yeah,
like, you know, and something, you know, not to just keep bringing it back to this Myst book, but it's like something I loved about this when I was a kid is that, well, it was like kind of written narratively, which I thought was fun, and like as a kid with a big imagination, that game like opened up a lot of my imagination. I loved that aspect of it, right? But then another great thing is like, they've got the first chunk of the book, which is written in that way, which is kind of intentionally vague and points you in the right directions, but doesn't just tell you what to do. And then in the last like 20 pages, it's like the quick guide. And it's like, it's like in fucking like Helvetica font or whatever. And it's like, go here, turn to the left, press this lever or whatever. So it's like, if you don't want to fuck around with the narrative, you can just flip to the back and be like, I just need one push.
At least
you know
it's
what I mean?
in the back. That makes me think of that Sierra thing where it's like, if I just go a little further down on this decoder thing, I can see the actual solution, and I could never just read the first hint.
It's a self-control thing, Patrick.
It's self-control.
It teaches kids self-control.
Yeah, I couldn't believe like how much control they gave us. Like I remember on the Castlevania books, like they like told me that I can invent a new map system and a new like means of explaining certain things. So we created like a map system with only key points of interest, with like write-ups for all those complicated parts. But we didn't talk about every single step. We didn't talk about like you had to walk to here and then whip this Medusa head and then walk over here and then kill the golem, because that's redundant. But you talk about the enemies, you do write-ups for each individual enemy, and then you just do the key points of interest. And it was weird because I expected the designers to be the ones to go, okay, well, we're going to be the ones that orient that for you and figure it out for you. But no, we gave them general direction, and then they figured out the rest on the art end. And that was astounding.
That's cool.
Because it made no sense. Yeah. Why would you give me this kind of power? This is so weird.
You'd find criticism both ways though, because there were some guide, and again, it was weird how much authorial control we had, but there were some guide authors who it was like almost like, I don't know, like I wouldn't want to read a guide like this, but it was like, you go in this room, you look left, you kill these 3 guys, you turn right, you kill these 3 guys.
Yeah.
To some extent that was driven by the time pressure of the process, right? This guy played through the game. He taped his playthrough. He wrote up his playthrough. Was that a viable solution of the game? It was. He submitted it. He moved on. Is that the best guide you would want, or the timeless reference? In my opinion, no. But that is the way some guys made their guides. Good for them. But Adam and I were much more of that school of thought. Whereas, like, if I'm teaching, I would always do really like insanely robust basics and mechanics sections, right? Mm-hmm. I loved doing that. I loved it. When Adam and I would work together with like, I'm writing up the mechanics. And I would do 30, 40. I think my Marvel vs. Capcom 3 intro and mechanics section is like 90 pages long. Because I figure if I'm teaching you to really play this game, if I'm teaching you to be decent at this game and to understand it, we don't need to worry about the minutia of you walk in this room and you look left, look right. You'll figure it out, because I was really a strategy guy, right?
Yeah.
But that was not everyone's approach, and time constraints are different, and different authors are different.
Well, Matthew, you got any thoughts to bring us home or anything?
I think how I use strategy guides, it just depends on the genre. For a Mario game, probably not using strategy guides. Pretty easy, can find most everything. But there
maybe just to find that one moon or whatever.
No, I'm perfect, Patrick. I'm 100% perfect. Odyssey's a perfect game. We've already established it. I think puzzle games, like you said, Myst is one example where I will try everything in my power not to consult a strategy guide. So I just recently played through Manifold Garden, beat it without a strategy guide. Feel proud of it. But I played The Witness several years ago. That game is way too fucking hard. I used a strategy guide for that. I just didn't know all of the math puzzles, and I didn't want to waste my time trying to figure that out. So I'll use it in some circumstances if I'm really truly lost, or I'm playing Resident Evil 8 right now. If there's like an item that's really far away, a secret animal, I'm just gonna look it up. I don't want to try to run around the map to figure out where it is. I'm just gonna look it up and just go there.
It is very, like you said, genre specific. Like a fighting game guide, that's not going to spoil anything, right? Like, but a puzzle game, it might. Yeah.
I mean, our fighting game audience, they wanted as many details as possible, and they wanted to be able to like look at a character that they wanted to learn and learn as much about that character as possible, so they could jump right into training mode and get cracking on the training part. That way they're as effective as possible.
I remember the way my like third eye was open for fighting games with that Street Fighter Alpha 2 guide. My goal with the fighting game guides, me and Adam did, and I did with other people or myself, was always that I want to give this feeling to someone else. Like they think this is a button masher, they're just playing with their cousin or their brother or whoever. I want them to know that this rabbit hole goes much deeper than they thought. That was always my goal. But it's not about spoiling things in that case or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe this leads into the ending, Patrick, what you're trying to get us to, what you've been trying to get us to for a really long time.
Absolutely should. I have to edit this later.
Yeah, just want to go through the top 5, according to Wikipedia, best-selling guidebooks.
This is always good.
Starting at 5, which is Myst, the Official Strategy Guide, 1993. Yep. Super Mario Bros., the Complete Strategy Guide, 1985. Final Fantasy VII, 1997. Yep. Mastering Pac-Man, 1981.
Wow.
And then Final Fantasy VIII, Ultimania.
Yeah, the FF7 book, that paid off homes for people. That came out. No kidding.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, we do need to move on. That was a really awesome discussion. If you're out there listening and you have any thoughts on either using a guide or about the industry or anything, we'd love to hear from y'all. And with that, unless anybody else has anything they want to shove in. Yeah.
Final comment. I meant to mention this earlier, but if y'all are interested in this and if you want to learn a little more about what living the life was like or what the process was like, my good friend is, see if I can get this in focus.
Ooh. Yeah,
Doug Walsh. He was, apart from Adam, he was one of my most frequent co-writers and a really good friend. He wrote a kind of a memoir after the industry collapsed in its prior form called The Walkthrough. Check this out. It's got a lot of funny stories, tea spilling, and it's probably, especially for Matt, like a little, if you want to know a little bit more about what the process was like, putting these together day by day and hobnobbing with different video game studios or video game celebrities. Like he's got a lot of stuff about Cliffy B in here for Gears or whatever. You should check it out. The Walkthrough. Awesome.
Yeah.
Walsh.
I think I will check that out. That
I think so
like
too.
A fascinating book. Yeah.
Well, with that, then we'll close this section. We'll take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the video games that we've been playing recently. This week, I have been playing some visual novels. The Famicom Detective Club game came out, or games came out for the Switch. So I've been playing The Missing Heir just a little bit. And then we talked about Donkey Kong. Because because I think this is changing now that vaccinations are a thing, but I share rumors with my 6-year-old son like this. So I was like, hey, there's a rumor there's going to be a new Donkey Kong game. And he's like, oh, that's cool. We should play Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze then. And so he and I have been replaying, and I've already beaten it because we play on funky mode for him. And it's like, takes away all the challenge, but it's fun still.
At least the movement is still fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great platformer game. So we beat that this week.
Are you liking Famicom Detective Club, by the way? I also started that game.
I do like it. I've been finishing up the Phoenix Wright original Ace Attorney trilogy games, and it feels very much just like those in terms of how you proceed and stuff. A lot more, or a lot different of a tone. And it's got voice acting. It's Japanese, but it still adds a lot to it.
I love that every single line is voiced. Yeah, it's pretty fucking cool. Even if it is in Japanese, it's great.
But it kind of makes it, because it feels, I always prefer watching like a movie, like a Japanese movie with subtitles or something. You know what I mean? And so it feels like you're watching a Japanese movie because it's with English subtitles. So I'm enjoying it, but I'm pretty early on. So
I'll go next. I've been playing Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village. I don't know what you call it. It's one of those. And I will say it is such a beautiful game. It's crazy. I don't know if any of y'all are playing it or have played it.
Just started turning it on actually recently.
Yeah,
I want to get to it, but I haven't had time. I'm really stoked.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's the first I think it's maybe the first next gen non-port game that I've played. I'm playing it on Series X, and the lighting is just mind-blowing beautiful. It's a crazy game. It's a silly game, which is what's so fun about it.
Yeah, it's a hand removal simulator.
Yeah. The funniest, I laughed so hard. There's a scene where Ethan, the main character, he gets his hand cut off, and he literally goes to put it back on, sprinkles some like health potion on it, and it's good.
Like you do.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great. Great writing, super funny.
Anytime I hear anybody just talk about that, my wrists start hurting. It's weird. I don't know if I could play that game.
It's a great continuation. I wish Resident Evil 8 was a VR experience like Resident Evil 7 was designed. I loved playing 7 in VR. It's a video game haunted house. And Resident Evil 8 is very similar. It's very haunted house-esque feel with scary stuff and spooky stuff. And my girlfriend won't be in the same room when I play it. And I can't play it at night. But it's a great game. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Very good. I'll go next. I haven't been playing too much new stuff, but I've been playing a lot of like weird, random old stuff. Fired up Metroid Zero Mission the other day just because I was thinking about all this 2D Metroid stuff, and that game fucking slaps. That game is amazing. I was playing some more Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics online, and the only reason I bring this up is I was playing Hanafuda. It was basically my 3 main games, which is Hanafuda, Yacht Dice, and Mancala. And I was doing incredibly well in all 3. And in all 3 games, my online competitors just quit as soon as I started bodying them. And I was so frustrated. And whenever that happens, I just scream "coward" into my Switch. and I really, really wish that people would stick through the games because it feels really good to win. Other than that, I've been playing some of the Famicom Detective Club. Haven't gotten as far as I wanted, but I'll hopefully be playing a lot more of that this week. And then other than that, I had a friend over this weekend, and we played some Nidhogg 2, which I haven't played in so long. Dude, Nidhogg is fucking incredible. And I love Nidhogg. And before, like when the Switch was first announced, I was like, that should be a Nidhogg machine, because you just take the controllers off, you set it down, play Nidhogg wherever. And I just like hadn't played it in years. And I just remembered like how incredibly hype that game is. And just like how if you don't pay attention, you just both realize that the 2 people playing are just screaming at the top of their lungs like the entire time because it's just constant going back and forth. So if you haven't played Nidhogg 2, I know it was recently on sale. It might not still be, but it's an incredible game, an obvious pickup for the Switch, and I really recommend it. Joe and Adam, what have you guys been playing recently?
I have been playing primarily Returnal lately, which is hard as balls. That game is tough, but I can't tell you how good it is. If you're willing to play a game that hard, the narrative, the storytelling is actually exceptional in it. I haven't played a game with a story that good since probably Control. Very similar in tone. It's very psychedelic. You don't know what's happening. Really, it plays to your head a lot.
Unusual for a roguelike to have a really awesome story too, right?
Yeah, it has a very specific mechanic in which there's a certain area you can go to unlock parts of the story. So the more you progress, that part of the stage actually lights up and tells you can go here and get more story, basically. And they also tell more story. They tell bits and pieces of story through the corpses that you find. I can't tell. I've been so impressed that they've managed to make that stuff work narratively in a roguelike, where the stage is randomly generated, but you just keep running into bits and pieces of stuff as you go.
Especially like Housemarque is not really known for their robust narratives in their games. For sure. But this has been exceptional. Like seriously, unbelievable so far. Yeah. Well, I'm glad now that Castlevania is over, you got a little bit more time to play some roguelike.
Oh, dude, I know. Seriously.
Joe, what about you?
I've been too busy. I have Returnal. I haven't turned it on yet because I have had like an hour to play every third night. And besides from the game I play is a game I'm working on, which is Battle for the Grid, which is not a good answer. But please play Battle for the Grid, but that's not recreation for me.
Right.
I have Returnal, but I'm scared off because I read people like, oh, you have a good run. It's 3-4 hours. There's no checkpoints or autosaves. You got to suspend the PS5, but if it
unbelievably
updates stuff,
hard. Yeah.
I'm waiting. I hope that they add some sort of like anti-scum quick save.
They need a save state for sure that saves your place so that if someone turns another game on, you can just go back.
I haven't turned it on.
People are like scared to put their PS5s into rest mode. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think a lot of people have been complaining about that. I think A, it'll come down in price, and B, they're going to add a lot of like quality of life patches. So
I hope so. I'm waiting. I'm really excited to play it, but I haven't touched it. All I've been playing is I've always loved the State of Decay series. It's kind of a sleeper for me. I loved it on 360, and I've been playing like an hour of State of Decay 2 on Series X because it's on Game Pass, and they did a really big glam up like late last year for Series X. It looks really good now. I probably have it at 800 hours in State of Decay 2 over like 4 years or something. That's not a very good answer, but that's what I've been playing. I'm looking forward to Returnal and Village when I have time.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and when does the Chun-Li expansion come out? You said it was this week, right?
Tuesday, the 25th. Ryu and Chun-Li Ranger, the Crimson Hawk Ranger and Blue Phoenix Ranger on Battle for the Grid.
Just curious, Joe, who do you main in Battle for the Grid?
Who do I main? I like Lauren. Well, before the Street Fighter characters, I like Lauren, Jen, and Goldar. So I'm a real tier whore. They're all extremely good characters.
Yeah.
After this, it's going to be Ryu, Chun, insert character here. Probably Goldar. I like big old dumb Goldar.
I like Goldar too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but Ryu and Chun are both going to be really good, and I think people are going to be surprised how they play. And we really took a lot of inspiration from, me and Long Tran, who's the other main designer for Battle for the Grid, we've both been fighting game lifers and playing since we can remember, since 1991. So we took inspiration from little bits and pieces. What do we like about Ryu over the years, Chun over the years? And we had shockingly little oversight. We get to do whatever we want. So those are our characters, and I'm really hyped for people to get their hands on them. Yeah, I'm excited.
Very nice. Cool. Well, that about does it for this episode then. Thank you so much, Adam and Joe, for coming on and talking to us all about your experiences writing for strategy guides. Thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick, online, I am everywhere, PDYX.
Hey, I'm Matthew on Twitter, MATHYOU.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And let's see, Joe Epstein, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at I'm Joe Epstein.
And Adam?
At Adam Deats.
Very good. Follow these guys. They're doing cool stuff. Make sure you check out season 4 of Castlevania too. That shit rocks. And I feel like I'm a fan. I'm a fan, so I can say that. I was already a fan before working on it.
This Super Switch Headz is brought to you by Powerhouse Animation.
That's right.
Austin and America's #1 animation studio. Powerhouse.
All comments are not reflective.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to move on from that. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter. We are at Super Switch Headz on Instagram and Facebook. And then, of course, you can always join our Discord community or our Facebook group, both of which will be in the description of this video. Both are bustling communities with lots of people. And then, hit us up. Send us messages. We'll be doing a Q&A episode soon. And, if you play your cards right and you're a big enough fan of the show, we might even have you on the damn thing. It's happened in the past. It's a lot of fun. So join those communities today. Ladies and gentlemen, that does it for the episode. We're done. That was a great in-depth look at the strategy guide industry. We could talk about that forever. And I'm sure we'll do even more stuff on strategy guides in the future. Maybe we'll do a book club after we read that book you were talking about, Joe. But other than that, folks, keep it real out there. We got a great episode for you next week. So make sure you tune into that. But otherwise, be safe out there. Keep wearing a mask. If you feel like you need to. CDC says you don't have to, but be smart about it. Just do what your heart tells you is best. Make sure you get vaccinated anyway. Let's nip this thing in the bud. We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.